Because what I hear too much is, well, science doesn't do this or that, or you can't trust science for whatever reason.
Well, I believe strongly we really can't connect God too much with science. Speaking from the Western term, that is actually a mixture of facts and theory. And God is considered, and He is, perfect without any mistakes or theories.
Well, so, I mean, science is I suppose we could say that science is both a methodology and a set of information, and mostly it's hypothesis and inference, right?
Yeah.
As to conclusion. So if God is an absolute true thing, how do you determine that?
Well, it's pretty simple. When you look at the system, and I'm talking about the human, the design of the human, the system from the way that it heals itself to, the way that we need oxygen. And you can tell, obviously, there's a great design in the way that we were created. And this type of intelligence shows there is something that is much higher. So I would call it the source. The source being God.
Well, we have to operate on oxygen because that's the environment that we evolved in. I mean,
I would say that's the condition how our Creator created us. He could have made us a rock. I could have been anything.
There are rocks, but yeah,
right.
I mean, rocks don't have minds, but I guess I can see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of. Do you know what the anthropic principle is?
What is it?
It reminds me of the idea that the universe is made just for us, because it kind of has to be, because otherwise we wouldn't be in it. Right. So it's kind of a misleading intuition, because it couldn't be another way for us to be here. At least not significantly different, maybe a little bit. But then again, it could have been a different way for other types of life. It's a little hard to tell, but given our physics, DNA seems to be consistent throughout the universe in terms of necessary for life.
I can pretty much agree with some of that. It's just the fact that if you notice the education system, it's constantly changing.
What do you mean?
If I was
education system?
So basically, if you compare like the books, or the information that was in the books, it's strictly information that's controlled. Because there was a story, my teacher, he's like, hey, I want you guys to write an essay about this guy. And then I went to the library and I had got the story from the library, and I came back and I told my teacher, okay, well, this is what I summarized, from that story. And he told me it was wrong. And I told him, that I got the story from the library, but it was the same story. But when I noticed that the same story that was in the school, it was different, so he told me it wasn't accepted. And from that day, I realized that, the schooling system is nothing more than indoctrination. That serves, the majority.
History is really difficult to document. Have you ever known a history professor?
Not personally.
I've known a couple.
Close relationship, but I know of, yes.
I've known a couple in my life, and it's interesting because you grow up learning history thinking it's this really stable thing, and then you if you talk to a historian, they start to tell you sort of the dirty details of it, that history is not as clean as we think it is, because we don't have that much information, because it's there's perspective. Sometimes the victors often will write the histories.
Exactly.
So we do the best we can. Right. Or they do the best they can in that field to try to come up with documentation and to whatever they have. Frankly, by the way, one of the greatest sources of documentation for history is people who write to their mothers. You know,
Right.
I read a autobiography on Lenin, and it was just amazingly detailed because he would always write to his mother like once a month or something like that, and he would give information about what was happening in his life. So they had this great trail of data, and there's a few people way back in history who did something like that too. But yeah, it's I mean, it's not indoctrination. It's like it's limited to the best that they have. We can consider it. I suppose we might consider it indoctrination in some place like North Korea for sure.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be totally honest with you, and in comparison, when we talk about the superpowers, we're referring to as the empires of today.
Yeah. Sure.
So I realized that the narrative that the United States and Russia, and I'm going to connect this with God in a second. I'm going to show you how this all connected with God.
You're allowed to go on whatever topic you want to, Kareem. So it's not mandatory. So feel free.
Okay. I didn't know if we want to be specific to the topic or
no. It's up to you.
Well,
this is really just if you can't think of something. So
it's something that bothers me the most. It's the collapse of the financial system that we are living right now. We are losing our position as first reserve. And
yeah,
I want to say that it's by design, 100%.
What do you mean by design?
There's hidden agendas to create a one world government.
By whose design?
Well, let's just call them the powers that be.
Okay, so you mean you don't mean by governments, but by
you got to look at it like this. Why is it that every single major empire has its flag in Antarctica, and they're all together? But the moment when the media, they want to portray China and Russia sticking together, and then they want to portray, America, NATO, and, the Zionist movement, together. So in actuality, I believe all of them are corrupt. All of these empires are 100% corrupt.
Have you read the history of China and Russia in the 19th century, or anything? That's not a book title, but just in general, have you read about that?
Well, I know a little bit of eschatology about the two. I have a little bit of eschatology knowledge about them, but not that much.
I didn't know much about it myself until a couple years ago. Yeah, I kind of had a pretty big gap in my knowledge, so I used to not like history, to be perfectly honest. And then I read I was looking to try to understand dictators and authoritarians, so I read the biographies of Lenin and then Stalin and then Mao. But they talked about the beginning of the Russian communist takeover, right, from the czars of before that. And it was interesting because Russia and China had been continuously trying to manipulate each other. It's like they were at times trying to cooperate when it was to their advantage, but with a longer term goal of trying to be the winner between the two. So they've always been trying to sort of control each other. And I suppose you could take that to a global scale, but it didn't really happen. And of course, that's much more difficult because you're across oceans and things, right? So you ended up with this China-Russia combination, and there's the communist parties that were sometimes helping each other, sometimes trying to beat the other one out.
Sure.
And then you had the Western as sort of two different axes of balances of power. So not so much the working together, if you read into the history.
Yeah, it's more of my enemy's enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
So we know that there's a struggle for the world currency to dominate. We know the BRIC countries, we know they're coming up strong, and we know that the dollar and the petrodollar system is losing its integrity, especially after what the King Salman has done. But one thing that we need to keep in mind, we cannot be brainwashed and let the elite continue to control the narrative through the media which they own.
Well, hold on. So petrodollar, oil supplies, they were supposed to be on decline from about 10 years ago from their peak. Unfortunately, global warming has shifted that now. If anybody knows this, that because of global warming, the Arctic is open. So now we have an additional supply that's about the size of the Middle Eastern supply. So whereas we were about to go downhill for the next 50 years or so on oil supply, now we get another 100-year cycle of all this oil before it all runs out.
Do you know who Admiral Byrd is?
He was a guy who went to South Pole, I think.
Yes, but do you know what he saw?
No.
Like,
It was
did you see what he revealed?
1920s or something, wasn't it?
Well, okay. Well, Admiral Byrd, he was a decorative. He was in the Navy, right? He had many titles before he became, the master of the ship. Then they gave him the. Yeah. He belonged to a pretty wealthy family, but he couldn't reveal the fact that not only did he discover more resources, and we're talking about resources that we don't have a clue, and it's the reason why they don't want nobody going over there. But ultimately,
no, that's not true, Kareem.
No,
you
there's
don't
videos.
go down to
There's
Antarctica
videos.
because it's almost impossible to survive.
Well, see, that's what they want you to believe.
That's
because
what's
you gotta
true,
understand.
Kareem.
That's
What's
on
true.
If you look up, they were only on the tip. When they made it to the giant ice walls, and you can even look up Christopher Columbus. Like the reason why he said he was going to India. That's because the reality, he was going as north as possible. He was going in a circle. So basically,
Wait. Are you talking about giant ice walls as in flat Earth?
The Earth is 100% flat.
Okay, Kareem, I don't know what to do with this because it isn't, and I honestly, I know there are people who do, but I really do not have an interest.
Okay, let me ask you this:
debating the flat Earth.
A mountain. Let me ask you this:
Yeah.
When you look at a mountain,
Yeah.
right? You think of how big it is,
Yes.
right? But the honest truth, the depth of a mountain is not how tall it is. It's in the ground. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up mountain is because mountain actually what stabilizes and keeps the earth from not moving.
No.
100%. 100%.
Kareem.
Now, if we wanted to compare the four creatures, what God said he created that move, we're talking about the sun, the moon, daylight, and nighttime.
Moving on, Kareem. I'm sorry, this is not my topic. Okay. There's another guy on TikTok who does flat Earth, so check him out. And he loves to talk about this stuff, but it's just not something that I do on this channel. Okay. All right.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that, Kareem. It's just, conspiracy theories about controlling the money and all that stuff. It's it's too far off topic for me here. I do atheism, I do counter apologetics, I do science, I do LGBT support. You can talk about other stuff, like I say, this is just an idea, but I don't want to get too far off, and I don't want to add disinformation or just to discuss or I decided when I started this that I was not going to spend that much time debunking some really obvious stuff, such as climate change. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit if it comes up, but no, I'm sorry, that's just not my channel's content. So this is more of an informational, if you want to learn something about why it isn't flat. But like I say, there's another guy who loves that topic, so. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, you belong.
Hey,
Welcome up.
Can you specify the question on the screen? Just say exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, because I hear people say all the time that, well, you can't, either they say you can't believe science because, follow the money, or science has been wrong before, so why would you bother with it now because it'll be wrong again in the future, which to me is just sort of dissing science. And it seems like they do this so that they can. It's like trying to detract, or not detract, trying to tear down the opposing camp, if you will. So if the alternative is we can't trust science and therefore we can trust the God hypothesis, those are really not related. So even if we take science out, that doesn't make the God hypothesis any more true or false.
I see. I'm trying to think.
I could say that. I need to learn to say that in fewer words.
I gotcha.
But, yeah.
So if like I know there's things in science where scientists and stuff believe in things that seem just as crazy as they make out the belief in God to be.
Well, if they believe something, they have a reason for it. But so, give me an example, and we'll talk about it.
So, an example that I've looked into is dark matter and dark energy.
Okay.
So when science, proposed the model of gravity and, made all the calculations for it, then they observed the universe and observed galaxies and seen how fast they were spinning and realized that they should be flying apart. And they weren't, which means there's more gravity than there should be. And the only way to explain that gravity is to say that 95% of the universe is made up of this undetectable matter or energy that possesses gravity.
Yeah, there's another source. There appears to be another source of gravity, and we don't know what that is.
Right.
So, I mean, dark energy, is really just a placeholder phrase for something other than gravity. And then, of course, the word dark is because it's not something we can see. It's not like a massive item, massive thing that puts out radiation. So that's the adjective dark.
Right.
So we don't know what it is, but there's something.
Well, from everything that I've seen when I've looked into it and tried to verify and double check, a similar analogy is like saying, it's like saying, okay, I've calculated the speed of sound. But when I observe how long it takes, let's say I calculate the speed of sound at 700 miles an hour, even though it's about 760 something miles an hour. And if I go 700 miles away and sound gets there in faster than an hour, instead of saying, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this calculation, instead, what if I said, oh, there's something else that's undetectable and invisible that's propelling that speed of sound faster?
Well,
that's
almost a good analogy. I'll get back to it in 1 second, but let me give you a more physical analogy. It's like before we knew that they were 7 planets. Oh, thank you. It's Halloween time, Halloween week. Before we knew that they were, Pluto. Before Pluto, we don't call it a planet now, but before we knew Pluto, I think it was the orbit of Neptune or Uranus. I always can forget which one is the most further out.
Yeah, I believe Neptune is the furthest.
Okay, so we were looking at the orbit of Neptune, and it wasn't quite going where we thought it would go based on the calculations of all the masses and movements of the other planets, right? And of course the sun. So That tells us there was a gravitational source that was given it a little bit of a tweak, and we hadn't found it yet. So that's the analogy.
Right.
So there's a gravity something, but we don't know what it is yet. We haven't found it. So
Right.
so we didn't make it up, and eventually we found the planet Pluto. In that case, it was a little bit easier because we could calculate where the perturbation was, and that would imply where the gravity source was. It's much more difficult than something as massive as a galaxy turning
Right.
or hoarding itself together. So we're proposing that there is more than just the 8 planets that is causing that. So it's not like it's a mysterious thing that we say we exactly know what it is. We just know that the effect is there. We have observed and replicated the experiments to document the effect.
Right.
So we have that as the reason to know that. So that becomes a fact that that the perturbation is there. So in the turning of the galaxies and the holding of the galaxies together, the fact is that gravity does not account for enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's something else going on. We don't know what it is.
Right.
Dark energy is just a name that we put there because it just we assume that it's not shining because we can't see it.
Right.
So we're not jumping to a conclusion. We have a fact, we just don't have a hypothesis that works yet.
But
We have a hypothesis, but not one that's been tested yet, because we don't know what to test.
It's not a fact like gravity's still a theory. We believe that we understand how it works, but to make the calculations work, it's not just a small tweak. They have to say that 95% of the entire universe is made up of this undetectable substance, and the only way to detect it is to assume that the gravity calculations are correct. So instead of saying that...
Yes. I see what you're going. Yeah. So, of course, if something goes off in an experiment, if you get a result that doesn't match what you anticipate, of course, first thing you do is you look at your experiment and see if anything if there's an extra variable or some sort of bias in there. So, you would go back and you would test your equations, right? Mm-hmm. The Einstein equations for gravity are well established and very well tested, so we know that the problem is not there. Whether it be in the Isaac Asimov, I'm thinking the Isaac Newton basic gravity or the general theory of relativity, that bit of gravity, those have been tested so well, so many thousands of times that we know that that's not the fault. So there's something else. So that's what science does. When you've got something missing or something that doesn't match, that's where you point your next generation of scientists to do their research and to try to come up with a hypothesis, and then to try to figure out how to test that hypothesis to see if their proposed explanation is true or not. You don't jump into a belief that this is what's causing it. It's just there's something causing it. We see the effect. The effect was documented and proven. We don't know what the cause is.
Okay. Now, I agree. So the reason science believes in dark matter and dark energy is, even though they can't detect it because it's undetectable other than seeing the effects of it, that's how we know it exists. So you could also draw a similar conclusion to God's existence, because if you believe in mainstream science, they believe that the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang created the universe,
right?
And that would be the beginning of space, matter, and time. And if space, matter, and time was created at the Big Bang, whatever caused that creation wouldn't be in the realm of space, matter, or time, which would then be God.
So the analogy fits. Your analogy is correct. So the observation that we have is that the Big Bang happened, right? And we have extrapolated back to define a time zero, if you will. We do not know what initiated it, right? So one of the hypotheses is God. Then you could add any religion to that, but for other reasons. So, but we don't have a way of testing that. So there, you don't take it, it's fine to have the hypothesis. It is not fine to then say that we believe in that thing, because there is no way to justify the belief. You can only justify the hypothesis. You can justify the proposal, but not the belief in it. Right. So it's like same thing with dark energy. It's like we know the effect, we see the effect, something's causing it, we don't know what that thing is. We call it dark energy, and maybe if once they figure it out, they'll change the name to what it's something else. So we used to use the word ether for what space is made of, and we got rid of that once we found that it actually wasn't there. So science can update itself, but it's a difference between having a proposed explanation and a believable explanation, a justified explanation.
Right.
God hypothesis is a perfectly fine hypothesis. It is not raised to the level of theory, if you will, or believability. If you think of theory as, once we are justified over 50%, which is to say more likely to be true than not, because we have enough experimental evidence of that.
Right.
And if God is indeed a supernatural thing, which is to say it is not made of the stuff of the universe, we may never be able to conclude, just as we may never be able to conclude that multiverses exist. It may be outside of our access.
So are you more of an agnostic to where you don't believe that we have the ability to know versus...
No, I don't go that far, because I don't know what future abilities will be. I'm trying to be as honest and realistic as I can. We know what's justified now, because we know what our ability is to test now, and we know the limitations of our abilities, and we know good logic, right? We can do a good job of determining what's logically correct and what's logically fallacious, incorrect, like doing a math problem wrong, And there's a lot of that out there in philosophy and logic. But the problem is that yet people go into this, yes, I know it's true, or yes, I believe it's true.
Right.
And it's just a hypothesis.
I see. I'm sure you've heard of this analogy or explanation, but from a logical standpoint, just like when you see complexity in any way, just like when you see a painting or a house, you know that there was a painter or a builder, even though that you don't see the painter or the builder, just because there's complexity. Even something that's simple as
I'll let you finish, but let me just say that's more intuition than logic. But go ahead.
And even something as simple as a name written in the sand. That's not caused by the waves, because it has a degree of complexity. So when it comes to life and how complex life is, and how science, we have zero, to my knowledge, we have zero evidence of any life coming from non-life. You can't get animate matter from inanimate matter.
Yeah.
There has to be some base form of life, and then it can grow in complexity. But we don't know how life came about, other than, a theory of a primordial soup, which is, I don't see how that's any stronger of a theory, because we have zero evidence of life coming from non-life. You see what I'm saying?
This is a field that is actually much further down the road than you think.
Okay.
So here's an example for you for everybody. This course is, you can get it on Audible and in video too. But even this thing was like about 15 years old now. So there's much more recent information even from this. But you're right that in terms of the abiogenesis, which is the transitional period from inorganic to organic, is not well understood at this point in time. It's a gap in current knowledge. Mm-hmm. I guess I can let the camera show it because I'm not covering up the title there. So we do actually understand this more than you think. There are articles out weekly. I mean, in the range of thousands a year on this field of origin of life. There is a. You on Facebook, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Are you on Facebook?
Yeah.
There's I think it's a page. I think it's a Facebook page. I don't think it's a profile. I think it's a page called Abiogenesis. Next time you're on Facebook, just do a search on Abiogenesis and you'll find the page. Okay. And this guy puts, he's really good. He puts like daily articles up of either new ideas or new findings, and because it's a very big puzzle, right? And we're only learning small bits at a time, and sometimes we learn negative stuff, right? We learn that, well, this can't be it because of XYZ, right. Or maybe it isn't it because we haven't found the other variables that influence us. So what you're saying is very intuitive, that inorganic doesn't go to organic, but we are probably about 50 years down the road of having a lot more information in this field than most people think. So at this point in time, it is not an unbelievable jump. I wouldn't say that we're over the 50% mark still. Mm-hmm. I'd say we're probably down, this is just my opinion, for what it's worth. Since I'm not in the field, that I don't know, maybe it's a 40%. We're getting close to that 50. Right. But others probably would disagree with me, but I don't know.
But it would also be a viable hypothesis to believe in that some sort of entity outside of life, mm-hmm. and God basically created life, mm-hmm. since we don't have any evidence that animate matter can come from inanimate matter.
Yes. It is a viable hypothesis, but understand, this is the same reason I'm not saying that I believe that abiogenesis happened. I think it probably did, but like I say, we're really around that 50% somewhere, where you're probably going to get different answers from different people. Mm-hmm. It would be nice if this was up at like 70 or 80 or something, but we're just not there technologically at this stage. It looks like we're heading there, probably within a generation. I've heard people say 10, 20 years or 5, 10 years, and right. I think it's probably going to be a little bit further out than that from what I've seen. But so this lines up parallel with the God hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And again, so take the God hypothesis, keep it on the table, but the problem with the God hypothesis is that to justify it, to raise it in credence higher and higher so that it's greater than 50%, I don't know how you do that. Every attempt I've seen to do that seems to be rationalization or beliefs with other assumptions or assertions with other assumptions and things like that. The logic, all of the arguments for gods fail logically. They're all fallacious, which shocked the hell out of me when I found that out. So the God hypothesis seems to be sitting still, essentially. It's been the same arguments are essentially being passed that were passed about 150 years ago. Some people are starting to make there's been a shift in apologetics to say that science proves God, to simplify it grossly. So that's going to have to be worked out in terms of, are those legitimate things? And you do that paper by paper, right?
Right.
And then, just give it time and give both of these hypotheses 50 years and see where we end up. So,
right.
And it's also entirely possible we may end up with both of them, right? Because we may find out that this is entirely possible, and we may find out that the God hypothesis is viable, and it could have happened either way. But we wouldn't. We'll never. If that's the case, we'll never know which one it is, because either of them could have worked.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, I think one of the things for me that really, like drives me towards the belief in God, isn't just like one hypothesis. It's, multiple, where, God is a possibility along with another possibility. And then
you mean like a natural,
yes.
process.
Yes,
also.
like God could be an explanation along with potentially a natural explanation, even though we may not be able to prove either way for those things.
I think there's an argument for what you're saying along the lines of the what the physical laws are, because that's another something that we still don't have a good explanation for. Why are the laws of physics what they are?
Right.
Because you could make the argument that God defined the laws of physics in the way that it would unravel naturally by abiogenesis and an evolution. So
right.
You could argue that this is God's method.
Right.
So even if we prove that, the God of the gaps, if you will, is still going to live in that until we have an understanding of how those laws came to be, which I think is even vastly more unlikely that we won't, compared to understanding this, which we probably will figure out, because we're seem to be halfway there on this one.
Right. When I just think about stuff we don't quite understand, the origins of the universe, or the origins of life starting in the universe, or the origins of consciousness, to my knowledge, I don't know if there's been any breakthroughs, but we don't understand what consciousness is or how we have it.
You're right. Yeah, that's still a mystery. It seems to be an emergent property of a physical brain,
right?
But it's still a mystery. What's fascinating to me is that we're going to create AI before, because we're basically there now. We're going to create possibly sentient AI, or at least equivalent to sentient in terms of a Turing test, not being able to tell the difference before we figure out what the heck makes up our consciousness.
Right.
That's going to come first. And then we're going to be sitting here going, are they conscious? I don't know. Are we conscious? It's we know that we're conscious, but we don't know exactly how it happens. Maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe quantum mechanics will help figure it out. There's some hypotheses on that basis with microtubules in the nerve cells.
Right. And even the mysteries of quantum mechanics. I'm sure you've seen the double slit experiment.
Yeah.
That's just crazy. When you observe it, it does something, and when it's not observed, it acts completely differently. And then I don't know if you've ever looked into
when it's measured, it acts differently.
Yeah.
It's not just it doesn't need a conscious observer.
Okay.
Welcome in, Paige. Paige wanted to come up and join us, so.
Okay.
Hi. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Are you on this topic? Do you want to join on this topic?
I was just listening. I was listening to y'all talk for a little bit, and I've just been interested in reading about just the makeup of scientific reasons why, just that even just the creation of our bodies, the complexity of it. Can point to a God,
but
meaning
only
DNA.
Only when you don't understand how they actually do come to
Right.
to function. And then we're about 50 to 100 years past that at this stage. It's because we pretty much do
Well,
understand. Go ahead.
Well, kind of like DNA, y'all were talking about some specifics. I mean, DNA is an amazing thing, but could it actually happen by accident?
It appears so, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's been even scientists that have, cracked the human genome or whatever, and the ones that have done the studies
Right.
have actually said that, it feels like there's a designer to this, that they actually feel like it's a glimpse of God's mind because it's so complex.
Well, the religious scientists, some of them do, yeah. I mean, we know at this point that DNA was preceded by RNA, right? Because I don't know how many people in the audience know this. I'll put it out for whoever. But RNA is a single strand. Remember, DNA is the double helix, the two strands.
Yeah.
So our DNA was preceded evolutionarily by single-strand RNA. Well, if you got single-strand RNA, that means you can make proteins. So that's how you get a lot of cell-building structures and stuff. So the question really has become in this field, how do you get from simple, very short proteins or short RNA to something that's like 60,000 atoms long or molecules long, kind of a thing. And that really just does seem to be a function of just giving it time. And because we know we can go from single amino acids to short chain RNA that can self-replicate, and we're probably talking about it in the 6 to 12 size ratio or range. And that's the real trick. It's the finding the self-replication. And once you have that, it's just a question of going plus one, and eventually getting to a more complex thing. So this is something we understand the sort of underlying process of without the specifics. The specifics are where the field is working. So we know how. I mean, it is an intuitive stretch because DNA is millions of
I know. I was just learning about it, like billions of like an instruction book that conveys these specific functions. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I was reading about even an atheist, Antony Flew. I had read about that he actually kind of found the existence of God because of this complexity himself.
Yeah, there's been a few of them. Francis Collins is another one. Well, he did it because of waterfalls. He was like awed by the beauty of a water and complexity of a waterfall. So, which is one reason you have to look at the consensus of a field, not just individuals, because individuals can be skewed by their personal biases, and the feeling of it's really a pattern recognition feature in our psychology that some people go to these explanations of either seeing something or assigning agency when there may not be agency. And you put those two personality features together and you've got somebody who can perceive purpose instead of function, and that leads them to believe in creators and things, which is fine for now. But as these fields advance, those explanations are starting to fall away bit by bit.
There's a little quote that I read that was kind of interesting. I mean, it's very simple, but it said, since we recognize that a car is obviously designed, why would we think that our much more complex design bodies just happen by chance? I mean, there's definitely a lot of specific things.
Because we know the process. Well, a car is a little bit of a different thing because it's a mechanical thing, right? Cars don't occur in nature. But other things like plants and rocks do occur in nature. So you have to make the distinction between the natural made and the natural, formed, if you will, formed by chemistry. I mean, you're never going to put all the atoms to make a car in a giant bottle and shake it and come out with a car. But
Right.
but you can put all the atoms to make a person in a jar and shake it, throw some energy in there, and come out with amino acids, which are the building blocks of life. And then it's a matter of figuring out the conditions that'll go from there, bit by bit. Remember, the first cellular life took about 200 million years, because the oldest life that we have, single cellular, is about 500 million years into the age of the Earth. And the reason I say 200 is because it took the first 300 for the Earth to cool down. Before that, it was just like, it was molten, it was volcanic and stuff like that. So it only took a couple 100 million years to create the first cell. But then it took like 3 billion more years to create anything multicellular. So that gives you an indication of the difficulty of going from that step to the next step. Once you get to that next step of multicellular, it's only taken about 500 million years to go from like a multi-cell hydra or something to us, and elephants, and an octopus, and a palm tree, and all the real complex stuff that exists today.
Yeah. True. Yeah, I just, I do believe in God, and actually, not just from, I feel like there's definitely some proofs and some scientific things like we talked about that I feel like are not just, I feel like we come from something, we don't just, nothing came from nothing. Something came from, we were made from something, Well,
but you have to acknowledge that we know a lot more than we used to. So, and it takes a long time. It takes somewhere in the range of 100 years. Where's my little piece of tape? For scientific information to really get understood by the lay public. And
or do you feel like what we know, more we know, that do you feel like that pulls people away from the mind of God or the actuality of God versus to God? Or you think that's an individual thing?
Away from the necessity to believe, because once you have an alternate explanation, you don't need the God explanation. And the one that I throw out all the time is Thor and thunder and Zeus and lightning, right? Once you know that how the thunder and the lightning works, you don't have to invoke the gods anymore. So that's gonna slowly happen. I don't know if it's gonna, it may take 1,000 years. I don't know. It's definitely that we're finding out that there's a lot more resistance, which is its own little study of human psychology as to why people don't they stick so strongly to the intuitions of a creator.
Yeah. Stuff like, I saw your Earth there, and I remember they were saying, scientists said, he hangs the Earth on nothing, and that's actually a scripture, but Job 26:7, and
well, it floats in space.
I think scientists actually said that too back in 1600s, but
go ahead.
I just feel like 20, I think it was like 25% of the Bible contains specific predictive prophecies that had little that haven't been fulfilled, and I don't know, it's one of the oldest books, different things like that, but it also biblically tells about the earth.
Well, the stuff that's where it gets interesting, because the stuff that it tells us about the earth, and for example, the firmament and the flat earth under the firmament, and then the sequence of what happens in Genesis, we know that those things are just factually wrong now. We know that, they what do they claim, that the earth comes before light, right? For example. and we know that's just false. So it makes perfect sense for somebody who's writing back in a time when they didn't know what modern physics knows, and why would they? Of course. But that's what they were writing. There's similar stuff in the Quran, for example, about what a fetus is like and how fetuses form. They speculate that people are formed from blood clots. They had no knowledge of sexual, sperm and egg kind of stuff, or genetics or anything like that. So they thought it just started small, and they repeatedly call it a blood clot that then grows into a human. That's their naive, if you will, explanation. And okay, it's the best they could come up with what they knew. But we know that's not true now.
So what do you think? You think the Earth is like what we have come to believe, that it's the round and global and that kind of stuff? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and spinning.
I mean, you read stuff like this. This is the subject of big history, which is just a broad phrase. Although sometimes you can find titles based on that, which takes you from the very beginning of the universe all the way to present day, and you can see how the planet changes, and how where the atmosphere comes from, and then where life forms, and how the having life on the planet affects other things on the planet. For example, the oxygen, right? Because once you have plants, now you have oxygen, and going into the atmosphere that was locked into rocks before that, and all this stuff starts to fill in. We know why the planets are round. We know why everything in space is round except asteroids. We have explanations for all these things. We know why they turn. We know why they turn in the same direction. We know why a few of them change turn anonymously in odd directions. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how much knowledge we have in the 21st century. So the challenge now is to get that to the lay public, and personally I think we should just have more, we should mandate 4 years of science education in high school rather than just 1 or 2. That
right.
would help.
Yeah.
Because there's so much to learn. I mean, there's so much to learn.
There is a lot to learn, and and sometimes, I don't know, through history, I mean, as science changes and we learn different things, so that changes in what we know. And even the Earth being round, and
it refines itself and self-corrects. That's part of the methodology.
True, but some of that correction, even read from some kind of book, was determined by man. That they thought, well, this is what I really feel like it is, and then we learn that.
So now this takes me back to here then, because if you dismiss science or degrade it in some way, does that make the God hypothesis any more believable? Does it add credence to an alternate hypothesis, such as the God hypothesis?
Right. I do kind of understand what you're saying. I guess for one, you have to have an absolute. So, like for me, the Bible's absolute. So actually,
wait. What do you mean you have to have an absolute?
Well, kind of like I said, I feel like most of us can agree that we came from something, right?
Yeah, I think most of us agree that something didn't come from nothing. Most of us agree that, yes. Right.
At least that part. But so, and if my absolute, so at least people believe that. But I guess I wouldn't say everybody has to have absolute, but I have an absolute, which I kind of base off the Bible. Like I kind of go from there, from creation. That's kind of where I start.
But why would you start there as opposed to any other creation story that's available to you on Earth? Why that particular one? Because I mean, there's thousands of creation stories.
Yeah, but I feel like the Bible's a lot older, and
every culture going back probably 200,000 years has had a
Well, see, I don't
creation
even believe.
story.
I don't even believe like there's been billions of years. I don't even believe that.
Well, then you need to do some
I
work
know
on
that
that
sounds
one. I can't
crazy.
help you if you don't believe that, because
But like
there were.
biblically, I used to think too, like the earth was round, like we normally do. But if you start researching, even just biblically, and like I said, I know my opinion, but like he put it on four foundations that it shall not be moved as far as the earth and the four corners of the
bother you
earth.
that you think the Earth is 6,000 years old or whatever it is, and then all the scientists of the world, except for the religious, a few religious scientists, the consensus.
Well, I know. See, on top of some of this, of course, I already knew and believed in God. So this was kind of a secondary. But I did start researching into NASA and actually the leaders of NASA, CERN, and all this. And you know what? A lot of them are Satanists. So that's interesting.
Oh my gosh, is this conspiracy theory night? Oh my gosh, you're like the third person.
Am I?
Oh my gosh.
That's
Okay.
funny. Well, I won't go into all that, but
I don't answer that. I'm seriously.
I won't go into that.
Trust me, I know two physicists who one currently works at CERN, and I haven't seen him since he went to go to work at CERN. And then another one used to work at CERN and now no longer does. There's no Satan going on. There's no religious part of physics.
I thought they actually said, not even just me looking up something, it was actually on the news even probably a year or so ago that they admitted that they were looking for another dimension for a God particle. So that's kind of religious in a way.
Okay.
I mean,
we found the God particle, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's actually a bad naming for it because it has nothing to do with God. It is the particle. It's called the Higgs boson that gives other particles mass.
right.
So
Yeah.
that's not actually a God particle. By the way, this is not for YouTube, but everybody else. I've been seeing stuff on the comments from TikTok that some of your comments are getting flagged as needing approval, and it's nothing that you're writing. I literally have not found one that. Actually, I have found one out of maybe 100 that deserve to be not shown. So I don't know what is triggering. But here's one. Just to grab one. It says because that's not analogous, it has been flagged as needing approval. So I'm sorry because I can't really talk and moderate the comments at the same time. So if you type in something and it doesn't show up, that's what's happening. If anybody wants to volunteer to moderate, I have given 2 people moderation abilities to allow comments and stuff. So, but if anybody else wants to join that team, that would be helpful. Sorry, Paige. Just.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, I won't go into that, but I'll just go back to saying that, as far as the scientific stuff and even just biblical, I felt like the earth sounds more, because I feel like God is not a God of chaos, and I feel like, the firmament and all that it make more sense. I feel like, if I believe in God, I believe in the devil, right? So that's why I mention these things, because why would we be lied to? Because if you believe in the devil, you know that he is the father of lies, right? So why would we be deceived by men that are under him?
Because that, to my perfectly honest answer to that, it just sounds too paranoid to be realistic.
That's the devil's scheme, though, to keep people thinking he's not real.
I'm not calling you paranoid when I say that, because that's actually not true either. Because I think we learn these things culturally very easily, and in religion we there's a lot of strength in religion, right? You bond together with other people. You get together once a week and things like that, and you share ideas and you reinforce ideas. So I think it comes from that.
I
largely.
don't practice anything like I just believe in Jesus and the whole Bible. And if you believe in the whole Bible, I mean, the God we serve we are spiritual. So
Let me ask you,
good or so bad.
How interested are you in knowing what is true as a general rule?
I'm a truth seeker.
Okay.
That was your question. Yeah.
So you are interested in truth, which is almost always the answer. Now, if that truth, not truth, because we never know absolute truth, but if evidence leans to we don't need that particular explanation, we don't need the God explanation for that particular physical thing or whatever.
Hey, the earth or something.
You know, such as just like I said before, we drop the Thor once we understand how thunder works, right? Would you persist with the God, or would you just keep the God and just drop that one element and say, oh, okay, now we understand that thing, so diseases come from bacteria, not demon serums or whatever?
You know, I would still believe God. I'm not gonna discredit God because I feel like God makes these things and we learn about them. It's not the opposite.
All right.
He created it.
I'm just saying, there's a lot more out there than you realize.
But maybe we get so smart we think our thoughts are higher than his when they're not. But he's a loving God. He's not. He's very interesting, but he's.
I'm going to bring Sophia up here also. And Dumblebee also has been patiently back there. So I usually don't do this until later, but let's just go ahead and go into group then with this much interest in the topic. Sophia, you wanted to join, so hey, Dumblebee, thank you. Sophia, you wanted to jump in. Did you have something on this specific conversation?
Oh, no, not this specifically. I just have an interesting point of view.
Okay, so hold for a second then. I mean, stay up here.
No problem.
And if there's something that you have to say related to what we're talking about, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I sure will. Thank you.
Okay. So, Paige and Yukalong, should I move on, or did you want to make any other points here?
Paige can go first.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'd like to hear some other people talk, and I may comment.
Because I want to let Sophia take a turn too. So, but Yukalong, you were here first, so.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to touch on, also, I don't know if you've gotten to the most basic parts of like atoms and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand that, I believe the nucleus of the atom is a similar comparison to a little metal BB in a baseball stadium.
Roughly, yeah.
So most everything's empty space.
Yes.
And then when you start making, zooming in even more and seeing what the actual particles are made out of and seeing what that's made out of, it's almost like everything's just vibration.
That's probably what a string theorist would say.
Yeah, this is just what I wonder. I'm not sure what's.
I wonder if we'll ever get to that actual foundation, or if we're already there, if it's always like going to get smaller and smaller. I don't know.
Right, and I don't know. So so things like that, where we may be able to explain things in the universe, but we can't account for the creation of the universe. We may be able to explain things in life, but we can't account for the creation of life.
Well, we do have an analogy of the creation of the universe in the creation of virtual particles that come out of quantum fields, because they just pop into reality out of nowhere. So essentially you've got a potential to create something, and they just happen, and we don't know of any cause that initiates that, and yet we know it happens. Doesn't last very long because you get a particle and an antiparticle, and then they kind of come back together and annihilate each other in a fraction of a second.
Would that not break the laws of physics? Like things being created?
It does. It actually breaks the laws of thermodynamics, but it is allowed, quote unquote, because they immediately go away. The thing is, you get a particle and an antiparticle, so in that way it's balanced. But then, since they also immediately go away, you started with nothing except the quantum fields, and then you end up with nothing. So
They just
on a longer
cancel each other
scale,
out?
on a longer scale, it doesn't. Say again?
Like they just cancel each other out? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but the weird thing is the one that still is with us today is that when Stephen Hawking discovered that black holes radiate on the event horizon, basically what happens is you get the creation of a virtual particle pair. One part goes in, one part goes out, one part gets radiated away, so that you actually do get those separated. Now, if you take the total of, the black hole plus the space around it, it's in balance because you end up with a particle and an antiparticle, but they're permanently separated from each other, which is kind of like saying that it's out of the universe, frankly.
Right. And then just last point, I just wanted to see what you thought about objective morality.
That's a big topic, so hold on that one. Let's go to Sophia first.
Well, I was gonna just go to bed after this, so we can just make it short. I just wanted to get your,
Okay.
opinion on if you think morality is
without
good.
going long. I believe that morality is subjective.
Okay.
So, but please come back and let's have that discussion because it's always a fun discussion and interesting.
I just went ahead and followed you, and I'll come back another time and we'll have that discussion.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Sophia, what did you want to come
Hello.
in? What did you want to raise?
Yeah, so I recently have been learning about the Quran, and I was a Christian, and so, it never was, logical, the stuff they would tell you in Christianity to me. Because they tell you, believe in God, worship God, but then they think God is, three people, and gets all confusing, and they, try to...
Trinity is self-contradictory, but yeah.
Right, yeah, and it kind of just wasn't, it's like they're chasing their tails trying to explain all this stuff, and I was like, it should be easy, right? So anyways, I started looking into
should it? No.
Well, it should be
It'd be nice if it
logical.
was
At least.
easy. Yeah.
It should make sense, They have to run in circles to make it make sense. So I started looking into Islam, and I found the Quran, and the Quran has. So there was a PhD chemist who named Rashid Khalifa. Have you ever heard of him? Well, so he was the first person to put the Quran into a computer, and when he did that, he discovered that the Quran has a mathematical code embedded in it, and it's super complex, so complex that if you remove letters from the Quran, singular letters, that the code would not work. It's very, very.
So what is the
deeply
code
embedded.
supposed to do? What does the code do?
So basically what they say is the code, because Muhammad said whenever the Quran was revealed to him that the Quran is the word of God, right? And so the code, what it did was that it made it to where it's like a fact-checking system to where you can know if the Quran has been manipulated by man.
But what is the code? What information does the code give us? I mean, we know we've got. You can take a program, for example, and add up the numbers of letters and whatever, and come up with a number back based on like the value of the letters, and that gives us a way to like verify transmission from one side to the other to make sure that those check numbers, those checksums, add up. But what does that code tell us? Because if we don't know what the code means, then it's not really a code.
A quick Google search. I'm looking on Wikipedia, which I know, not a credible source, but like if you look at the sources that the Wikipedia article lists, it says that no independent mathematical institute has given this claim any validity. I mean, I can read a little bit more into it if you want me to give me like 2 minutes.
That's okay. But let's give Sophia a chance to put some meat on the bone here. So, because to me it sounds like kind of like numerology, coming up with finding patterns where there really aren't any. So, I mean, how can you tell it's a code unless? Well, what does it tell us?
Well, basically, it tells us the validity of the Quran, because if you remove anything from the Quran, then the code does not work. And the code is 19, and 19 is a prime number, and it's also a very it's not a very frequent number.
The code is 19.
Yes.
So what does that mean? The whole thing adds up to 19, or
it
19?
Looks like certain things. It follows like the exponential of 19. So 19 to the power of 2, 19 to the power of 3. I don't know how it does, but like if you look at the text, somehow it does. But it looks like that people try to use this to show divine authorship.
Why would it have to be? Go ahead, Sophia.
Right, so I don't have, my papers fell off my table and they're all over my floor. I had printed off papers.
Welcome to entropy. So,
but basically, so the first surah of the Quran, it has the Bismillah. It has 19 letters in it, right? And so 19, that's not the only one. There's a lot. And 19, basically, there's a lot of different ways that the Quran can be divisible by 19. And it predicts that over it is 19 is a verse in the Quran. So, and it also predicts that that it will be revealed, and that God will give us a way to prove that the Quran has not been altered. But if you look into it, because I can't explain the entire thing right now.
It looks like it uses the occurrence of words.
Yes.
Certain words, and the number, the amount of times that word appears.
So in Arabic, they didn't have numbers. There was letters that also had a numerical value associated.
What do you mean they didn't have numbers? Numbers that's how we get the term Arabic numbers.
Right, but
how do
letters.
You say that they don't have numbers and then use the word numerical? That is.
What I mean is the letters in Arabic have numerical value. I guess
that's what they use for numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we know that this is a culture that is very much into patterns and stuff, right? Because you see people doing stuff, trying to do stuff on anniversaries and tribute to this or that based on 9/11 was 9/11 for a reason. I don't remember what it was, but I remember hearing the explanation. So this was a culture that was very sort of into that sort of numerology type of thing. They could have constructed on that basis. But I'm more struck by the comment here that the consensus of experts who study this type of thing are not convinced by that. So if it's not a field that I have to go by the consensus.
Well, that is just one Wikipedia page. Maybe will you click on another link maybe and see if.
We're not going to go through a big research thing here, obviously on a live or a Facebook page.
Anyways, my point is that if you look into it more, then you will see that it is so intricate and so deeply embedded into the Quran that that there's no way that it could have possibly have been written by people that were like basically pre-empire times. Like it would require a computer to write something that is so long. The Quran has like 150,000 words, and if you remove a few letters from it, then the code would not work.
So what do we do with?
Well, it also.
What do we do with the pieces of it that are false, like talking about the moon splitting in half and the idea that fetuses were blood clots?
Yeah, it gets male and female like reproductive anatomy pretty wrong.
What do we do with that inconsistency?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of a lot of the Quran is like allegorical, so I'd have to look up those specific verses to see if those were allegorical.
What would that be an
references.
allegory for?
But I'm mainly talking about
fetuses
like
or blood
19.
clots. That just
The bone forms first, and then like flesh and blood cover it. And also I'm like looking into the 19 code. It looks like you kind of have to do a lot of hopping around and corner cutting to, get this code in the first place.
I mean, no, not really. Here, let me just get something for you. Hang on.
I mean, I'd rather not read off the criticisms section of the Wikipedia word for word.
Yeah. Well, we're not gonna go into that much detail.
Yeah, we don't.
Sophia believes this, and that is fine for her. But it's people can look into it on their own. We're not going to determine.
Sophia, I just ask you to look into it a bit more.
Yeah. Well, I'd ask others to look into it, frankly. If Sophia believes it, then that's good for her. But if it goes against the consensus of scholars who've looked into this, that's the thing that concerns me more. I'd be leaning toward that as the more realistic interpretation than something essentially based on numerology. So.
Okay, well, maybe Dream Team knows a little bit about it, but maybe he can chime in. But also, Dream Team, he's my husband. Yeah, he's actually a scientist, so...
Go ahead, Dream Team. What have you got to add to it? As long as you're in the room, when anybody's in the room, you're free to comment at any time, so... If I'm only doing one-on-ones, then I only let one person up. Once I've got more people, then everybody's allowed to comment at any time, so...
Is my mic stable?
You're kind of quiet, and I'm hearing a sort of a wobble going on.
Okay.
But I can understand you pretty well, actually.
Okay, I think it's pretty rough. I'll try to adjust if I need to.
At least at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really going to discuss much. I don't really have that much information on the Code 19 topic. I was more interested in the title of the live.
It looks like there's like entire verses that you have to omit for this to work because it will cause some like occurrences because it uses the amount of time certain words appear, so it will make them not multiples of 19.
Yeah.
And I mean I've already brought it up, but this has not been like confirmed or reviewed by. Well, it's probably been reviewed, but it's not been confirmed by any outside mathematic institute, which I would say is a pretty necessary thing to give validity to something.
Okay, well, I'll go look and see about more mathematical stuff.
Okay.
That would mean they would have to do the analysis. So how many have actually done the analysis?
Yeah, one thing, Wikipedia is getting better and better, so I don't dismiss Wikipedia so quick these days.
Yeah, Wikipedia can get pretty vicious if you get something wrong. Like I saw somebody, they were like saying a ship was like a certain length, and they got it off by like 2 inches, and they like banned them from ever.
Yeah, and Wikipedia is not just editable by anybody anymore. So, but what I was going to say is that
just
go to
source-wise, you look into the source that's there. I mean, it depends how many actually attempted to ever do that.
look at the references that it gives, and then try to evaluate those too. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll go get more references and come back with my arguments, and I'll follow you and join one of your lives later on. Thank you for your time.
All right, take care.
So my question regarding the live question, how does science make the God hypothesis any more believable?
How does dissing science make the God hypothesis more believable?
Oh, dissing. Sorry.
How does putting down
Dissing
science make the God hypothesis more credible or believable?